When John Elstrott told me that I would be receiving the Tulane Entrepreneur of the Year award, he said I would have to make a speech. Contemplating this, I prepared two alternatives. One that would be like a classroom lecture and last for about an hour, and one that would last for a little less than 10 minutes. Earlier tonight, to test the waters at the cocktail party, I took a survey of 7 or 8 people to find out what they would prefer to hear. How does a mediocre college student at best, who likely could not define or even spell entrepreneur in 1962, wind up with this award? And what can I say tonight that would be of interest to the many entrepreneurs in the audience who have done far better building businesses than I have, or to the young people here who have gotten great educations from the universities that will likely make them more successful than I have been? Well, I'll give you a snapshot of my life broken into 3 parts: why it happened, a narrative of how it happened, and what were the lessons learned along the way. Leaving the Army after my 2-year obligation, I went to work for my father in our single-unit liquor store with 6 employees. As the video said, I found out real fast in the Army that the turf battles and the cover-your-butt mentality of middle managers was not the way I wanted to spend my career. Working in the store, I had no real ambition, no real plans to do anything, just enjoying life with my new bride. Played a lot of tournament golf, just like Tulane. But my dad was a wise mentor. He surmised that I would not be happy working for him, so he called me in and said he would help for 6 months, and then I was in charge. That took a lot of courage, since the liquor store was our primary family source of income. But he was true to his word, not second-guessing or making any of the final decisions. This is an important lesson for you young people who will be going into the family businesses. Choose your fathers wisely. After 2 or 3 years sliding along with the store, I began to worry what would happen if the dry county adjacent to our liquor store went wet. This fear was the motivation that ignited my career. After opening a second store and then a third, we started making some good money. But after a few more years, after opening 6 stores, we were blocked from further expansion in Georgia due to a new interpretation on the number of stores a person could hold. About this time, I learned that people who start businesses often aren't great at managing them. At least that was my case. With some money in the bank and a smoothly running company, mostly being managed by subordinates, I had time on my hands and frankly was bored. So I decided to learn how to fly an airplane. Interestingly, this turned out to be the vehicle, and I use the term in more ways than one, to really grow the business. So with a brand new pilot's license and a brand new plane, a single engine prop, but still mine, I flew over to play a golf tournament in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was time to make my comeback in tournament golf. It was a good and bad experience. The golf was really bad. But Myrtle Beach looked like a great place for a giant discount liquor store like we operated in Georgia. Since every store there was a mom and pop. 3 stores in South Carolina, we were doing very well. And without the airplane, it would not have happened, because I would never have taken the time to commute back and forth as much as I had to. Now, however, having reached the limit on number of stores in South Carolina, I started getting bored again. About this time, a young chef I knew approached me about partnering in a restaurant. Having a great love for food due to my 4 years in New Orleans, I said yes. The budget for renovating a historic train station in Columbia, South Carolina was $1.5 million. But like most of my budgeting, it was obscenely low. The actual cost was not 1.5, but 3.6. With the realistic prospect of over a $2 million loss if the restaurant failed, I got scared again, realizing losing $2 million at this point would be very difficult to overcome. In 1983, $2 million was a lot of money. At least it was for me. So I worked the floor lunch and dinner 5 days a week, trying to ensure customer satisfaction. Then returned home for 2 days to oversee the beverage stores. 24/7 is a good description of those days, plus a lot of anxiety over the prospect of failure. Fortunately, the restaurant was a home run, and after a year we opened 2 more restaurants, followed by a 4th several years later. Unfortunately, the chef partner and I got crosswise, so I bought him out and became CEO of the restaurant company as well as the beverage stores. Although I knew nothing about food production or the details of running a restaurant, I was confident in my ability to lead people who had this expertise. Once again, by the mid-90s, with my oldest son now in the restaurant company and taking on more responsibilities, I was ripe for something different. I just read where Joan London, the TV personality, said, "Reinvention is the key to staying vital." I like that. Sounds better than being bored. The liquor stores were now being managed by my son-in-law, Locke, who was doing a far better job than I ever did. Same situation in our real estate companies, where I really never had a lot of input anyway. Real estate development was initially started by my father and was now being run by my son, Jeffrey, who also handled the financial responsibilities of all our companies. So I didn't have to worry about either of these parts of our business. My oldest son, Greg, then caused a life change for me when he gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. One day he came in and said, "Dad," he said, "I'd like to have a talk." Well, I don't know how many of you out there have children that come in and say, "I'd like to have a talk." But when they come in like that, it's usually not about where we're going to eat dinner tonight or if we're going to the ball game. Something big is coming. Greg looked me in the face and said, "Dad, I see this company going forward with 2 people at the helm. One is the president and chief executive officer, and he runs the company. The other is the chairman of the board, and all he does is play golf all the time." Greg says, I'll be happy to take either job, but you get first choice." So when he said that, I took my keys out, threw them on the table, and said, "Call me if you need me. I'll be on the driving range." True story. So this lesson that was originally learned by me from my dad was now being done by me. When the kids are ready to take over the leadership, step aside and let them be the boss. After I had made my successes, it was time for them to make theirs. Since that time, I've directed my energies towards senior amateur golf and had a record far better than I ever expected. I will admit, however, that I do stay involved in the family ventures just enough to aggravate the kids. I mean, after all, what should a father do but needle the kids every now and then? So the original why of my entrepreneurship was the fear of needing more money than we were making in our one liquor store in 1964. And you have heard the narrative of what transpired over the years. So what are the lessons learned? You might disagree with some of these, but they work for me. The first thing is I found out you don't really necessarily have to invent something or have an original idea. We found success in the liquor business by traveling all over the United States and observing the best retail liquor dealers to see what they were doing and bringing those ideas to Georgia and later to South Carolina. Emulation was also the way our restaurant company expanded, where we originally took upscale casual dining to South Carolina and later took a New York-style steakhouse to southern Florida before anyone else had done this. Lesson 2 came from a mentor who told me if you aren't experiencing some failures, you aren't taking enough risk. But try to ensure that if something fails, it doesn't sink the ship. Sometimes you have to take big risks, especially starting out. But as the enterprise grows, betting the farm is not my way of thinking. After our companies got big, the last thing I wanted to do was change my standard of living and to give up my toys, particularly my airplane, which by now had become a nice little jet. My son Jeff knows if all else fails, the airplane is the last thing to go. You've probably heard the conflicting ideas of if it ain't broke, don't break it. Or if it ain't broke, break it. I'm not sure which one of these is correct, but I do believe you should never be afraid to try something new in your business or personal life. Barbara and I just moved to New Orleans after living in Atlanta for 50 years so we could be in our favorite city in the world at least half the year. Ambitious for people our age? Forget about it. Change is invigorating. Never believe you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I know a lot of old dogs that love a new trick. Never forget your employees. As soon as I got big enough to need help, probably about the second liquor store, I always wanted to allow associates to realize their dreams. This may be the most important lesson I learned, and is especially true now with our companies. After all, how much money do you really need? Spread it out to your team. If you don't, when you get to my age, you'll be giving it away to the likes of Tulane anyway. Which isn't all bad either. As the business grows, continually ask yourself, what are you doing that you don't want to do? Then get someone else to do it. In dealing with subordinates, ensure they solve the problems. You may have heard the story of the monkey flying off their backs onto your backs. Turn that monkey around in midair. Don't let them give you the problems. Ensure that they give you the solutions instead. Focus on what you like to do and are good at. Remember, it's only work if you'd rather be doing something else. But also remember, the delegator must take ultimate responsibility for what is passed on to someone else. Delegation becomes abdication without follow-up. No success is final. When you think you've got it made, you're one step from being a has-been. After all, the real thrill is in the hunt, reaching for success, not getting there. Or as the story goes about the young man going to a bordello for the first time with his uncle, remember, Sonny, the best part is going up the stairs. And finally, the essence of an entrepreneur. To be sure of hitting the target, shoot first and call whatever you hit the target. To close, I would like to recognize the one person who made my journey a joy. The one person who has never doubted my ability, picked me up when I was down, shared in the successes and failures, and never once lost a verve for life or a positive attitude. Will you stand up, my darling, and will you in the audience join me in recognizing the real reason I am receiving the award tonight? I love you, Barbara.